Okay, welcome to the final video. I promised this was going to be fairly short. Alright, so a religious revival happens in the United States at this time. In the mid-1800s, many Americans worked to reform various aspects of society. Dorothea Dix worked for improved treatment of the mentally ill. You have religious leaders who organized to revive the nation's commitment to religion in a movement known as the Second Great Awakening. An important advocate of this movement was Charles G. Finney, who helped found modern revivalism. A number of new religious denominations emerged from the new religious revival at this time. These included the Unitarians and the Universalists. Also, Joseph Smith, a New Englander, founded the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, whose followers are known as the Mormons. After being harassed, the Mormons moved to Illinois, which I think they were formerly in Missouri. Then they moved to Illinois, and then moved out. Okay, so after the murder of Joseph Smith and their continued persecution, the Mormons settled in Utah. Lyman Beecher was instrumental in establishing associations known as benevolent societies. I can't talk today. Although they were first begun to spread God's teachings, these societies also sought to combat social problems. Let's see, what else? Women were particularly active in these revivalist movements and became extremely active in the religious-based reform groups. Okay, so optimism was high about human nature, and the rise of religious and artistic movements led some people to form new communities. These people formed these communities, believed that the way to better life and freedom from corruption was to separate themselves from society and form their own utopia, or an ideal society. The communities were characterized by cooperative living and the absence of private property. Hippies. I'm kidding. Anyway, utopian communities included Brook Farm in Massachusetts and small communities established throughout the country by a religious group called Shakers. Many reformers argued that the excessive use of alcohol was one of the major causes of crime and poverty. These reformers advocated temperance, or an abstinence from alcohol. Several temperance groups joined together in 1833 to form the American Temperance Union. Temperance groups also pushed for laws to prohibit the sales of liquor. So, some reformers focused on improving prison conditions in the nation as well, other than just alcohol. Okay, the women's movement. In 1800s, people began dividing their life between the home and the workplace. Men generally went to work while women took care of the house and the children. Most people at that time believed that the home was the proper place for women. Catherine Beecher, she argued that women could find fulfillment in a responsible position at home. Many women saw themselves as partners with their husbands and as such believed that they should be treated equally. Many women began to believe that they had an important role to improve society. Some began to argue that they needed greater rights to promote their roles, and other women also argued that equal rights for men and women would end many social injustices. So in 1848, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton organized the Seneca Falls Convention, a meeting to focus on equal rights for women, and one that marked the beginning of the women's movement. The statement they distributed was called the Declarations of Sentiments and Resolutions, called attention to their cause. Throughout the 1850s, women organized more conventions to promote greater rights for women. All right, during this time, you also get the abolition movement starts, which called for an immediate end to slavery and polarized the nation and helped to contribute to the Civil War. Many Americans had opposed slavery, and there had been opposition to slavery since the Revolutionary War. Some anti-slavery societies believed that ending slavery would not end racism, though. They believed that the best solution was to send African Americans back to Africa. Some societies formed the American Colonization Society, or the ACS, to move African Americans to Africa. The ACS acquired land in West Africa, chartered ships, and moved some free African Americans to a colony in West Africa that eventually became the nation of Liberia. Colonization, however, was not a realistic solution. The cost of transporting was too high, and most African Americans regarded the United States as their home and had no desire to migrate to another continent. Most of them had been born here. So, in the 1830s, the development of a large national abolitionist movement was largely due to the work of William Lloyd Garrison. He founded The Liberator, an anti-slavery newspaper. With an increasing following, he founded the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1833. So free African Americans also played a prominent role in the abolitionist movement. The most prominent was Frederick Douglass, who published his own anti-slavery newspaper titled The North Star. Also, you had Sojourner Truth, who was another important African American abolitionist at this time. Many Northerners, even those who disapproved of slavery, opposed abolitionism, viewing it as a threat to the existing social system. Many warned that it would produce conflict between the North and the South. Others feared a possible huge influx of African Americans to the North, thus the racism. Still others feared that abolition would destroy the Southern economy and thereby affect their own economy. Most Southerners viewed slavery as essential to their economy, and therefore they opposed abolition. Some defended slavery by claiming that most enslaved people had no desire for freedom because they benefited from their relationship with the slaveholders. In 1831, Nat Turner led a revolt by enslaved people that killed more than 50 Virginians. Southerners demanded that suppression of all abolitionist publications at this time, and Southern postal workers refused to deliver such publications, and the House of Representatives, under pressure from the South, shelved all abolitionist petitions at this time. Okay, that concludes our quick little video on other movements going on in the United States at this time. We have one more video for this week. Or actually, this is the last video this week, I'm sorry. And look for a small quiz. Thank you. Bye.